I got the new world in my
They ain't got no muscle, no hustle, no backbone.
Well, good evening. This is Mr. Not Advice. I've been meaning to get around to do a podcast about China, the tariffs, as well as some of Trump's actions and my thoughts about them. Just as a precursor, I'm going to look at these as much as I can from a factual standpoint, or what is the highest probability outcome or possibilities. Whether or not I support what he's doing, which I generally do, is irrelevant though to how I analyze this. As the same thing with China too. So before I get into it though, remember this is for entertainment purposes only. This is not to be construed as advice, an offer to buy or sell anything, and you should never ever get any advice from a complete stranger off the internet. Always consult with your trusted advisor before you do anything with your money. Okay, having covered that, so here's where we're at with China, right? Rumors back and forth on whether or not they're talking to the U.S. As we all know, uh, we've got, I think the last list was 27 or 34 countries have contacted the US. And there's a list of countries such as India, South Korea, Vietnam. There were two African countries in there also that Japan was in there that are likely to be signing deals in the next couple of weeks. This is a big deal. And so I'll get to the reason why. Let's start with China. So where we're at with China is this back and forth, this public back and forth of, I'm not calling you, you didn't talk to me, I didn't talk to you. China's lying. Obviously, they've been in communications with the U.S. via the South Korean national newspaper that posted photos of Chinese financial committee representatives entering the Treasury Department door quietly, trying to be quiet about it. So they've been in contact too. So understand what matters really, let's strip away the hyperbole from both sides. The bottom line for me is China is not in a position of strength. They are not in a position from a alliance standpoint. I'm talking about political and economic alliances. They are not in a position of economic strength within their own economy. The longer this goes on, the worse it is for China. Yes, it's worse for the US. Yes, you have to pay more. Yes, these are first world problems. Okay? If this continues on in China, I mean, it's a simple formula. If this continues on, people get laid off, they return back to their farms. Okay? Who's paying the bills? What about all the factories? There's going to be social unrest. Remember, China does not have social safety guards and safety nets in place. That means if you lose your job, there's no welfare. Okay? If you can't pay the doctor, you don't go on Medicaid. Okay? If you can't pay the rent, you don't get to go for rent assistance. There's no EBT cards, okay, to help out with food. If you don't have a job, you're on your own. So what they do is, or the current policy is, if any factory or manufacturer is found guilty of not paying their workers after 3 months, means they can not pay them for 3 months, but if they go longer than that, okay, then that manufacturer can either be fined or tossed in jail. And so what's going on is, already before the tariff situation, there are already issues with Chinese factories being the workers being paid. This is just exasperating point. Look, I'm a Gen X guy, so I remember when the wall was up with Eastern Europe and Russia. And I remember watching just the lies that came out of Russia. Now, I had to learn there were a lot of lies coming out of my government too. So that helped me become a critical thinker. But sometimes things are not as complicated as we make them out to be. And I think that's where we're at with China. This is very, very simple, okay? Depending on who you will trust as a source, the U.S. accounts for about 34% of their sales, their economy, okay? Look, I'm more of a blue collar investment guy and trader. I don't know all the fancy financial terms. I do, but I don't use them. I try to talk the same way that I like to be talked to. Just simple. Anyway, going back to China. Let me make one more statement. They are paying for 25 years of being a bad actor on the world stage. Understand this. For 25 years, in the late 90s, they got into the World Trade Organization, and the World Trade Organization, they were also granted most favored nation status, which provided them cheap money. And so for those 25 years, though, have they opened their market to anybody? No. Okay. Do they tariff everyone else? Yes. Even their trade partners. Do they use smaller countries as vehicles to cheat international law? Yes, like South Korea, like Vietnam, ship the parts there, they assemble them, and it's shipped out of Vietnam. Yeah, that's illegal. I don't know why everyone is, oh, poor China. I don't think anybody's saying poor China, but I don't think anybody really, very few people understand the level of criminality. They steal IP. What's IP? Intellectual property. How does this work? Effectively, if a product sells, let's say you come up with a great product you put on Amazon, what they will do is copy it and then flood it with cheap knockoffs that completely undercut you by price. And by the time you get around to legally defending it, if you have the capital, they're gone. They've moved on. This happens throughout the world. Understand this is why nobody's coming to defend them except Spain. Why? I don't know. I think it had to do with a natural gas deal or something. But they literally, nobody wants to defend these people, this government. And let's be clear about this. When I talk about China and I'm negative about China, I'm talking about the CCP. I'm talking about the Communist Party. I'm talking about the People's Liberation Army or whatever they're calling it this week. I'm not talking about the citizenship. So yeah, nobody's coming there to defend because everyone wants to see if the U.S. reorders with China. You don't think everyone else is going to want to show up at their door and say, hey, wait a minute, why are we paying you tariffs? China has gotten away for over 2 decades of ripping every other country off. What's happening to them now, okay, is just a comeuppance. It's inevitable. It's called karma. I don't care. So look, they're not in a position of strength. The longer this goes on, the more people get laid off as factories shut down, and the more time it will take to ramp back up. They need it to resolve quickly, but if they can't appear as though they've bent the knee, because their domestic population, that will play very badly. Look at the tools that they have. Okay, they can try to flood the market. They threatened it. They threatened to flood Europe with cheap product, which would be a complete deflationary spiral. Okay, because that means they'd flood with cheap product. That means the products that were built or made in Europe would also go down, right? That didn't work. They could support their currency, their yuan. But if they continue to support the currency, which will support their stock market, fair enough. But if they do that, then their rates will go down. But the rates won't go down because the only way that they can keep their economy afloat, and this was pre-tariff, is through stimulus. So any effect that they would get by supporting their currency, and they can't make their currency too strong, by the way, if they do that, then their exports become even more expensive. Or they can do the other side. They let their currency drop, let their exports become cheaper, but that's going to cause their rates to go up, which is going to cause their stocks to go down. Here's the other problem. The rates go up. Unlike the U.S., which, at least in the U.S., the private sector took up all the bullshit mortgages in 2008. Well, see, in China, it's the PBOC, the People's Bank of China, that backstops, that owns 70% of those mortgages. Now, individual municipalities will own also, but they're still backstopped by the central government. If that falls, and this is how it works, the tariffs go on, factories close down, people lose their jobs, banks are not able to extend, China absorbs these massive losses, individual investors flee China, their markets. I mean, it can get bad really, really quickly. Okay, but China, again, I want to make this clear. They are paying for 25 years of being a very bad actor on the world stage. I haven't even gotten to the soft warfare that they do to every country they're involved in. Okay, hey, let's just do one thing on the global stage. Let's forget about the argument about tariffs. All we want is for every other country to open their market to U.S. products. That's it. No country wants to do that. We are being, as a country, we are unfairly penalized because we are a wealthy country. this is part, and I'll get to this, what Trump is really trying to do, I think. Look, when the first deal was signed, China's screwed, okay? Because a baseline will be set for all future deals. I think China's screwed already, because if Apple's talking about moving production to India, and we're talking about that India could be the first deal that gets signed, that's that puts China in a position where they lose the ability to frame the discussion. What I mean by that is they can no longer just make statements that would exist in a vacuum about what the U.S. really wants, what they will agree, because the U.S. will have agreed to another country. So it throws out a lot of their arguments of the U.S. being a bully, of the U.S. Executing unfair trade deals. Look, we do a deal with India or whoever, it's Japan, they're not going to get on TV and say it's an unfair trade deal. They're going to lose that ability to do that. Now, here's the problem with that. If they lose that ability throughout the world, it's eventual that it'll bleed into, well, the domestic news. Okay? So they're sort of screwed when that first deal is signed. China also doesn't have sufficient dollar reserves. This reminds me of when Besant and Soros broke the Bank of England. So the Bank of England didn't have enough dollar reserves. Why do you need dollar reserves? Well, you sell your dollars in order to support your own currency, which is what happens when corporate or when the bond vigilantes come in and do a raid on your currency. Okay, that's what happened to the Bank of England, and Soros and Besant effectively put the Bank of England out of business. So here's what happens with China. Okay, they stopped reporting their dollar reserves a number of years ago, so we really don't know. We have estimates of how many, what their dollar reserves are. They have a very limited amount of dollar reserves. Why do you need that? Because you need something to sell in order to buy your currency. Because you can't just print it, because if you print it, it's inflationary, right? So they can sell dollars, because they're certainly not going to sell gold. Okay, so they have very limited weapons that they can use. So one of them is they don't have sufficient dollar reserves. Number two, they do not have a consumer base to their economy. And they've been trying to stimulate the consumer base for like a decade. So this is nothing new. They haven't been successful. They're not going to be successful. 70% of their mortgages are backstopped owned by the PBOC. That's very weak. Again, that's not a mature financial structure. Okay, I mean, effectively, I hate to use this analogy, okay? All right, but effectively, I look at China's economy. They didn't really suffer in 2008, and almost every economic number that comes out of their mouth is a lie, because it's a centrally-run communist government. Look, I know for you younger people that are listening to this, you can't possibly. I know it's hard for you to grasp that a central government would just constantly lie, but I mean, and yet you probably, that's a totally different topic. You probably assume that your own government constantly lies, but how could China possibly lie? Of course they lie. Okay. And so let me wrap this up that, look, if there's mass layoffs, there's going to be social unrest. If there's social unrest, then President Xi, he's gone. I mean, he will be removed. Okay. At the end of the day, the U.S. can find a new supply chain. China cannot find a new customer like the U.S. Given time, they don't have time. Okay, and again, although the U.S. has far too many weapons it can use, and it's not using them. I mean, it could delist Chinese stocks. Boom. It could get rid of whatever 40,000 Chinese, 400,000 Chinese students that are in America. It could revoke their visas. Boom. Lots of those are known CCP kids. So yeah, I know it's a nice, warm, and fuzzy to assume, oh, well, they're here to become American. They're not here to become American. There are a lot of weapons that the U.S. can bring to bear, and I think probably one of the concern is you don't want China to be destabilized too much. But here, this is in the China thing. This is why I think it's much more than tariffs. Okay, again, it doesn't matter whether you agree it's the right thing or not. These are things that I think have happened, and I think is what he's trying to do. Okay, I think Trump is trying to do much, much more than tariffs. He is literally trying to reorder the global financial system. How? Well, I think the first thing he's trying to do is destroy the globalism model. So prior to '99, there wasn't a globalism model. Trade deals were done bilaterally. If we want to do a trade deal with, let's say, Germany, we did it straight with Germany. We didn't do it with the entire EU. So under the World Trade Organization now, you had these large, let's call them sovereign corporations, right? Sovereign trade groups that then we negotiated with. And I think that put the U.S. at a great great position of weakness, because I think bilateral trade deals, as it's historically been done, generally speaking, is serves the U.S. interests much more efficiently and much more specifically. Yes. However, what happened also was China was allowed into the WTO and granted most favored nation status because here's what they promised. They promised they would open their markets to everyone, Europe, Asia, US. They didn't open their markets up to anyone. And it is everyone else's fault, okay? Because they allowed them to get up to continue with this bad behavior, right? So yes, there is blame to carry around, but at the end of the day, that was supposedly the deal. And so when you hear about, well, they gutted our manufacturing, yes, it effectively it created the framework for which manufacturing from first world countries would be driven out of business and replaced by cheap manufacturing in China, which are artificially low prices, which then is going to cause huge trade imbalances. I mean, I'm oversimplifying this, okay? But this is how I need to think of shit. But at the end of the day, China didn't keep their part of the deal, okay? So I think that along with China, he is trying to destroy globalism. I think by doing that, forcing countries to do bilateral trade deals, which he's doing. I think by destroying globalism, it also reduces the control of the military industrial complex because they're not able to operate under a global trade umbrella. Instead, they have to negotiate doing business in each country. Look, it's not too hard for them, but it makes it harder. I also think he is trying to reduce U.S. reliance on force projection, war, to fund the growth of our economy, and move to more of a private sector funded economy. I absolutely think he's trying to bring manufacturing, specifically heavy manufacturing, as well as technology manufacturing, back to the U.S. And I think he's doing that both for an economic standpoint as well as to prepare for war if it comes. I think he's also trying to secure supply channels. Panama Canal and Greenland would be great examples. We already saw what China was doing by literally disallowing U.S. ships to come in or charging them as much as triple the rate. U.S. military ships pass through the canal. It was theft. It was theft. It was illegal, but of course nobody bitches about it. Okay, I think that's also why he's talking about Greenland. I think he's also identifying friend and foe. I think the Canada-Alberta independence thing was stirred up by him purposefully. Because we know there's sufficient evidence and concern that Canada's government is perhaps a little bit too understanding of what the CCP, Chinese Communist Party, what they want and their wishes. I also see him engaging in business with equal opponents. I mean, for the life of me, I don't understand why people get pissed about, well, he's talking to Russia. I mean, what the hell are you talking about? And don't start with me about, well, Russia invaded Ukraine. If you're going to talk to me about that, then go look at the Minsk agreement. And look at how Zelensky came to power. He came to power in a coup. So don't talk to me about that. And by the way, it took Russia, 6 years to finally do something about the fact that in the Northeast regions, we're being persecuted just because they were Russian. The church was being persecuted. So that's not relative. But if you want to have the discussion, we can. But here's the point. Hey, doing a business deal with Russia is a good thing. I'd rather do business. I'd rather know who my enemies are and perhaps do business with them within constraints so we have some level of relationship, okay? Than not. So, and especially a nuclear power. I mean, look who Trump is doing business with. He's going to get a trade deal with India, nuclear power, okay? He's going to trade deal with Russia. That's going to come, nuclear power. He's trying to neuter China, a nuclear power. He's going to do something about Iran, possible nuclear power. Don't even talk to me about Israel. But at the end of at the end of the day, I don't know why people are upset with him. He's not a Russian agent. Get that out of your mind. It has never been. It's been, in fact, factually unproven. So back to the tariffs. The U.S. via tariffs is reordering political ties via trade deals. Okay, not treaties, not political treaties, trade deals. It's so much more effective at avoiding conflict than any treaty. Think about it. If you're a country, you know who runs every country, and those are the elite, the business owners. Okay, they don't give a shit if citizens die, but they give a shit if their businesses suffer. So I think what he's doing is very smart. And yeah, I do think he's that smart, by the way. Okay. I think the US is weakening China now before it is too late. Okay. If China continued on this path and where they're able to steal, lie, and cheat without any penalty, that you know what happens if you got a kid who gets away with steal, lying, and cheating as a kid? They grew up to be one bad psychopath. So we got to prevent China from doing that. I mean, do I think Trump wants regime change? Yeah, I do, but I don't think he's going to say it yet. Again, China, the CCP is the bad actor, not the Chinese people. The CCP engages in war with everyone they do business with. This is how they do business. Oh, and there was a side note. I do have experience because growing up in the business in the early '90s, mid '90s, my I guess my really cutting my teeth learning about investment banking were deals in Shenzhen, China with chip manufacturers. And so Chinese, it's different. They do business differently. Bribes, not a big deal. Sometimes expected. But to them, it is about their 4,000-year-old culture and about this nationalist pride when they do business. So it is a culture of relationships from a geopolitical level of one of convenience. Okay, so they are in soft war with everyone they do business with, and China's been actively working towards destabilizing America from the inside at least since '99. There is no doubt that the base ingredients for fentanyl come from China. Number one, there is no doubt that China has been the actor trying to hack our infrastructure. Okay. There's also no doubt that China's been screwing every other trade partner in the world through tariffs and taking advantage of them. Right. I mean, there's just so many things. There's just no doubt of. So I think it's time. And again, I think if Trump is successful in maintaining the narrative, if he gets some deals under his belt and things become positive, I see more and more people who were like absolute Trump haters now going, well, let's take a look and see. He might be able to thread the needle, and we might end up coming out better off, generationally better off for, might be even 2-3 generations better off than any other country. I truly believe this is possible. Okay. And I'm not one subject to hyperbole. He's got to maintain the narrative, and we need to sign deals soon. Okay. But I will say this, I would be prepared for much more market volatility. And I think that's going to come through social disorder because, I think there's two things. Look, Trump is not screwing around, and it doesn't matter if you agree or not, or like him or not, or any of that. He's not screwing around. And he's going to do two things if he needs to. He's going to suspend habeas corpus, okay, to deal with these they're idiotic, moronic judges. I mean, you can't have a district judge, overriding the executive branch. I mean, as a Democrat, you may sit there and think, oh, that's hilarious. No. What happens when it's flipped? You cannot do that. That's not the way our government is structured. If you don't like it, then you probably should move. Okay? But he's going to suspend habeas corpus in order to deal with these judges. And I believe he's going to be forced, he's going to be forced to use the National Guard on U.S. soil, because I think there are arrests coming, and I think they're coming for high-profile people. I do. I do not think this is about tariffs. I do not think this is about make America great again. Just that. I think he is literally trying to reorder everything. And if you sit there and you go, well, this guy's not smart enough. Come on, man. I mean, the guy's not an idiot. The guy's a successful businessman, no matter what you say. So we got to deal in the facts. Okay. And this is all without any attacks from Mexican cartels, terrorists that may have leaked in, far left, into the next, up to the midterms is an increase in social disorder. within this country. And whether it's purposeful or not, I don't know, but I think that'll happen. And I do think that Trump is not playing around, and we should be prepared for the shock level to go up, just because we've never seen it before. Remember, habeas corpus has been suspended before by 2 or 3 other presidents. One of them was Lincoln. I mean, he was locking down newspapers, right? So it's just going to be a shitstorm, people. So if it happens. So anyway, that's my view on China. What I think actually is going on with tariffs, and my hope for what Trump is able to accomplish. So, hey, thanks for taking the time to listen to me today. And you can always reach me, obviously on Twitter at Mr. Not Advice, also YouTube, Mr. Not Advice. And I'm in Discord. If you want that link for free, just DM me. You can reach me at TheBoss at mrnotadvice.com. And my website is mrnotadvice.com, and I'm on a bunch of podcastings. Anyway, have a great evening. Talk to you soon.
You ain't holding your breath, man, cause I'm out here, I'm hungry. I don't play around, trust me. Ain't had as much drive since my Honda Civic got rusty, and my girl said she loved me. It's funny, just thinking back, study hard for that 9 to 5, like I thought that should be good with that. It was dreaming, still dreaming. Spotlight on me like Willie Beeman, still performing like Al Pacino. Instagram and tuxedos with my peoples. We growing up, still don't seem like we slowing up. 10 squad, we throwing up every time that we showing up. Get it while I'm living. All I ever hear's the clock tick, tick, ticking. So I'm about my business and I'm running with it now. They don't wanna give it up, we gon' make it out. Get it while I'm living. All I ever hear's the clock tick, tick, ticking. So I'm about my business and I'm running with it now. They don't wanna give it up, we gon' make it out. It don't get no greater, feel like I'm on fire. Feel like I'm Johnny Storm, feel like I'm volatile, explosive. Get close enough, you'll notice. Your girl act out of character when she see me approaching. Ain't poaching, I'm just saying, it's nothing. You punching above your weight, I'm something. She ain't seen no substitute in the 18. That's BA, Baracus, that BS, that whackness. Get no play in my axis, make them jump like AJ Hackett. Guarantee you, in these boots, they couldn't walk 1 mile. Really need to go and hang it up like a drunk doll. So behind the times, they should probably rock a sundial. Shattering their dreams, I can make big puns smile. Music from the soul, don't need them to help me. If they fiending for the flash, they should take another selfie. Said I'm running like Mo Farah, so dapper. Swear the whole world could go against me, it don't matter, man. Get it while I'm living.